Okay. Katharina. So, good morning, everyone. Guten Morgen für die Deutschsprechenden. I would like to do this meeting in English, as not everybody is German speaking. First of all, thank you to Sebastian for inviting me, giving me the opportunity to talk to you before the online retreat starts. So Sebastian is organizing a 3-day online retreat. As far as I understand, the participants of the retreat will sit 3 times 3 periods a day. On Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I won't be able to sit with you, but if you have questions to me before, you're welcome to ask them at this time. And I also wanted to invite everybody else on the internet who might be interested, even though they're not participating in the retreat, to also join. So I could imagine that some people who are watching now will not participate in the retreat, but you're also welcome. Ask me anything. If possible, as I announced on YouTube, please ask the question in English so that I can also answer in English and everybody can understand. But if you say, I don't speak any English at all, you can also ask in German. In that case, if it's okay, ask your question in German and I would translate it into English and give at least the answer I would give in English. So hopefully you can understand it and everybody else can also understand it. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
So, who wants to ask a question? Who has a question?
No.
No questions? Great. I mean, that's the best start for the retreat. No questions.
I have a question.
You have a question? Okay, Chris, please go ahead.
Oh.
It's frozen. Oh.
Is it Chris that has a question?
Chris is gone. I have a question in the meantime.
Okay, Amanda, go ahead.
How do you maintain a proper practice at home? I mean, in the city. Now you're in the city. What do you, let's say, promote? Now, I mean, it must be different now, not being in Antaiji. But how do you keep an intensity and what do you?
I mean, you asked, how do you maintain a proper practice? And of course, the first question on my side is, what is a proper practice? As you know, in Antaiji, I would be sitting, well, the normal schedule would be 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. And then we have 9 days session per month. And when you stayed at Antaiji 15 years ago or longer, I was still participating in probably most or all of that Zazen. And then later when my kids got older and I had to bring them to the bus stop to go to school, I stopped sitting in the evenings because that was just the time when they would come back from school, so that at least I could eat dinner with my family. So the last couple of years I would sit only in the morning and I would not sit with the Sangha in the evening. So in a way you could say I stopped practicing properly at that point, if you define practicing properly as sitting 2 hours in the morning, sitting 2 hours in the evening. But of course, spending time with your family is also proper practice. And here in Osaka, where I now live, of course, I sit even less. So I could, of course, try to maintain to sit at least 2 hours in the morning by myself. But right now, I actually, to be honest, I enjoy not having this pressure that I have to be there on the map each morning at 4 o'clock. But I can sleep until, say, 7 o'clock. Right now, because of Corona, I can even sleep longer because the kids are not going to sleep. So everybody right now in the household is sleeping quite long. It's long, like, well, summer holidays. But I don't really think that that's an obstacle to proper practice. Actually, right now, well, funnily, I spend more time daily on yoga practice. Last year, I started to learn Ashtanga yoga, and right now I do more of that than my regular old-fashioned Zazen practice, time-wise. But I have the feeling that the yoga practice also helps my sitting. So I don't think that I'm somehow betraying my Zen practice by doing more yoga now. But back to your question, how do you maintain that discipline? In my case, like when I joined Antaiji, when you're in a monastery or when you're kind of living in a sangha, of course, you have no other choice than to follow the daily life of the sangha. So even though sitting 4 hours a day sounds hard, if you're living at Antaiji, it's pretty easy because it's just what you do. It's just as easy if you're at home and you sit in front of the TV every night for 2 hours. It doesn't really take more effort in Antaiji to sit 2 hours in the mornings and the evenings. That's just what you do. And everyone probably, after they join Antaiji, after a while, you think of leaving again, even though maybe you make that decision like myself. I thought I would stay there for as long as it takes me to get enlightenment, at least. I still had this idea in my head that practice is about getting enlightenment. Right now, I'm not enlightened, but maybe if I try very hard in 3 or 4 or 5 years, I get enlightened, and then I can get back to Germany. And until then, I will stay. But what happened, and I think that happens to a lot of people after 1, 2, 3 years, you realize it's not as easy as you thought. Practice is not the way you thought it would be, and you think about leaving. And sometimes it even happened to me, for example, during sesshin. I got so, how do you say, annoyed about the other people around me. Like a lot of the Japanese monks were sleeping, and I was responsible of the goat, and during sesshin, the goat is all the time meh, 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 meh. And you can't concentrate on Zazen because what is happening to the goat? Maybe she got lost somewhere, maybe she escaped. And every couple of sessions, you're the cook, so if you cook for the other Japanese monks, and they always complain about what you cook. So one thought that came to my mind after 2 years or so is I could do this by myself. Why don't I go back to Germany, maybe buy some cheap house somewhere in the countryside and do this all by myself? It would be so much easier. Then I don't have these sleeping monks around me. I don't have a goat that I have to care for. I can cook whatever I want and nobody's going to complain. It would be so much easier to do this by myself. One of the reasons why I didn't leave was that I knew I can't do it. In my head, it sounded pretty easy. I mean, nobody forces me to do this in Antaiji. In Antaiji, I get up by myself 3:45 in the morning, and I do Zazen because I want to do Zazen, you think. But actually, everybody knows you wouldn't be able to do it if not everybody else would be doing it. And from today, you're going to do this retreat, and everybody's sitting in their own home. But I guess, and that's the reason why you have this retreat, it's a great help to know that actually I'm not sitting here all by myself, but there's, I don't know, 20 people or even more that are sitting at the same time together with me. So I knew that in Antaiji, somehow, of course, I could, in theory, leave any time and sit by myself, but I practice, I can't do it. I need Antaiji. But then after 8 years or so, after I got Dharma transmission from my teacher, at one point I knew I can do this. Maybe not Antaiji schedule, but myself, but I can maintain the practice. So when I left Antaiji in 2001, I was 33 years old at the time. And at that point, it felt, internally, it felt different than I felt 27 or 25 or so. At 25, 26, I was really serious about becoming a monk and practicing, but I still knew I can't do that by myself. At 33, I knew I can continue daily practice. So that's when I went to Osaka, to the park, to sit there. And sitting 2 hours every morning, even if I was by myself, and some days I was sitting outside and it started to drizzle a little, started to rain, but somehow I knew I can do this. I think it came from the inside. These years in Antaiji helped me. Also, at that point, I had nothing else. I had nothing else that I want to really continue. And I wouldn't have felt okay living in a tent in the park in Japan somewhere and going begging into town, if not at least I keep up the practice. So these 2 hours sitting every morning, at least for myself, it felt okay to then later go into town and stand there with a begging bowl and receive money and food from people. Because if anybody had told me, what do you do? Then I say, I sit 2 hours every morning in the park and you can join me if you want to. That's maybe not much in the eyes of many people, but at least to me, it felt I'm not betraying the Buddha way there. So, I mean, that helped me at that point in Osaka to keep up what you could call proper practice, at least daily practice. And I did only once in December, I did this Rohatsu session in the park. But even at that time, at age 33, having had Dharma transmission, I doubt that I would have been able to do that all by myself, all alone. What helped me was that there was another guy who had also left Antaiji a couple of months before. He was Japanese, and he was living somewhere out of Osaka in the mountains. He had also a tent there. He was also living in the tent. At some days he would come into Osaka to beg, and sometimes he came to join me in the mornings for Zazen. And we had decided together in December, we do this session together. And with 2 of us, it was possible, but I doubt that I could have done it alone in 2001 in December. And I doubt that I could it now. For example, if I would decide I want to do a 3-day retreat like you do it now, I probably could do it if I joined you. But I doubt that I could do that all by myself, that I would have the discipline. So even now, it's a great help to know there's people outside there who sit with me. Or in the case of the park thing, the first couple of weeks, I was mostly sitting by myself. And as I told you, sometimes it would be raining, there's bad weather, it's cold. What helped me a lot was always the thought, but still there could be somebody coming today. Maybe somebody's coming right now. So even if I had the temptation to go back into bed to make this thing public and say anybody can join me anytime, it helped. of course, it was my personal practice. And I know I'm not doing this for anybody else. I'm doing it for myself. It's my time, my practice. It always helps to know I'm also doing this for the whole rest of the world. And actually, somebody might be joining me just right now today. I don't know, does that somehow relate to your question or answer your question, Amanda?
Yeah, I think yes, and it's interesting because hearing myself saying proper is funny now, of course, but it's good to hear that we all struggle, maybe even even the best under us, and it gives me a lot of hope. And it's good. I hear that it's good to practice together. That's what I take from this. So I think what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess you all know that it's important to practice together. Otherwise, you wouldn't be making the point to join this retreat. Those of you who join the retreat, you could just say, well, I sit by myself, but I decide if I want to sit 7 hours or 10 hours a day, and I sit with my own schedule. It actually helps to agree on a schedule and sit together, even though you're actually not physically sitting together. Being connected in mind helps a lot. Otherwise, yeah, you probably wouldn't be here right now. Okay, any other questions? I think Chris wanted to ask something, but then I couldn't hear him. Now, right now, I can't. Here, there's Chris.
So my internet crashed. I'll try one more time.
Yes.
So I listened to your podcast, one of your podcasts, and you talked about some of your first sessions, and that so I have never done a session, and when I meditate for a long time, sometimes I get a little pain. I think that's normal. And you said in one podcast, your first sessions, you got a lot of pain. You're grinding your teeth, and you're trying to get through it. And I find myself, or anybody finds themselves, wanting to sometimes I find myself wanting to readjust a lot, and to try to deal with some pain. Yes. In that case, how do you recommend going about small readjustments, or trying not to move and getting through the challenging times sitting?
Well, maybe it's important to also say that, well, you can hurt yourself during the Zen. And you shouldn't. So it's not about kind of physically tormenting yourself. On the other hand, I also try to encourage people not to move. For that, of course, it's possible that right from the beginning you choose a sitting posture that allows you not to move for the whole period, be it 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever it is. So if you can't sit in full lotus for 40 minutes, then don't sit in full lotus. If you can't sit in half lotus, you don't have to sit in half lotus either. But even if you sit on a chair, for example, it usually starts to hurt. If not after 40 minutes, then the second or third period, or the second day, the third day. Even if you sit on a chair, it starts to hurt. So if you move every time it starts to hurt, you will be always moving. So I would say choose a posture where you know you can sit for 40, 50 or 60 minutes without hurting yourself. And when it starts to, without, well, hurting yourself physically, to do kind of damage, really lasting damage, like damage your knees, for example, damage your ankles, you shouldn't do that. But if you're sitting, for example, in the Burmese posture and it still starts to hurt, sit with the pain. Accept the pain. Don't grind your teeth either. So the point is, and that's easy to say, it's hard to do. Don't try to escape the pain, and the easiest way to escape the pain is to just move around a little bit. Don't do that, but also don't grind your teeth and fight through the pain. So neither fighting against the pain nor trying to escape from the pain, but just sitting with the pain. You could say you embrace the pain, you accept the pain, you allow the pain to be there. And for example, when we sit outside in the park, especially in summer, there's lots of mosquitoes come. And I'm always surprised that a lot of people can't even accept a mosquito biting them during the Zen. So some people are all over the place in the summer trying to fight these mosquitoes. And then I say, well, hey, if you can't accept that little pain that is caused by the mosquito, how will you sit with the pain, for example, during a session? So in the case of a mosquito, think like it's a blood donation. You do a little blood donation, and actually these mosquitoes don't suck so much. So if even for 1 hour, there's always mosquito sucking on you. You donated only a little amount of blood to the rest of living beings. And during the Zen, it might hurt a little bit more than a mosquito, but often what happens the moment you stop to escape and the moment you stop to fight against it and you just accept the pain, you realize, oh, this is actually not killing me. It hurts, okay, but it's just like with the mosquito. If you think, I don't want that mosquito to bite me, that mosquito has no right to suck my blood. In that moment, even a small mosquito can cause hell for you. I'm not supposed to move, but this mosquito is biting me right now. What do I do now? And if you stop it and just say, please, please, suck all the blood you can suck, and then have a nice day, then the mosquito doesn't cause any pain more, or small pain, but not much. And from my experience, that's the case also for lots of other pains. I mean, just allow the pain to be. And if it's really big, but it's not physical at the end of the day, for example, you do 10 minutes of kinhin and the pain disappears, that means it was probably mostly psychologically. Even if the psychological pain becomes so big that it thinks this is killing me, and that can happen, especially if you're sitting a retreat and on the second or third day, you might think, I need to move now, this is killing me. I still encourage people to sit there with the thought, okay, I'm gonna die here on the cushion. And from my experience, that can help a lot. Or actually, I would even say you need to have that attitude. At some point during your practice, there's this, how would you say, the eye of a needle that you have to pass through. In the New Testament, Jesus would talk about this eye of the needle that you have to pass through to get to heaven. It's the same in Zen. You have to pass through this eye of the needle, and the eye of the needle is this thought, this is killing me. So what? So what? You're gonna die anyway. Why not today? Why not today on the cushion? It's a beautiful day to die on the cushion. And once you pass through the eye of the needle, there's no problem anymore. So yeah, don't kill yourself physically. Don't cause any damage to your knees. Nobody's going to take responsibility for that. At least I'm not going to take any responsibility for physical damage that you do to you during the retreat. But on the other hand, if you found your posture and you know this posture is not going to cause me physical damage, if it feels like that, then stay with the posture. Don't move. Don't make even small adjustments, except, for example, you feel I got tense in the shoulders, then you can of course relax the shoulders. If you realize you move your thumbs around and they're like this, then of course you can adjust them back to this. But apart from that, I would say sit with the pain. Allow the pain to swallow you up if it becomes really big. Don't fight against the pain. Don't try to control the pain, but allow the pain to do anything that it wants with you. Okay, yeah, Yorgos or Horgos, how do you pronounce that? But you're mute now. If you have a question, you would have to unmute yourself.
Okay, now, do you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you. How do I pronounce your name?
Yorgos. This
Yorgos.
is a Greek name. Yorgos.
Okay. Hello.
Okay. Hello, good morning. My question, I have a series of questions. Let me start with the first one. Once I read a sentence by another Zen priest, or a Zen priest. He is living, I think, in Tokyo, Isho Fujita.
Yes.
Yeah. And the sentence was, Zen or Zazen is not meditation, or meditation is not Zazen. And so it is a kind of little bit of a dark statement. Do you can comment on this statement, or? I think I have some idea, but maybe it would be very interesting to have your comment.
Well, Isho, Fujita Isho and I, we come from the same tradition. Isho-san, he's also trained in Antaiji, although we never trained together. He was in Antaiji 10 years before myself. I think what he's basically means is that meditation usually means that we sit in a posture that's often quite similar to Zazen. So people sit with crossed legs. They hold their hands maybe in the same mudra. But usually when people talk about meditation, they mean that the important part starts after that. You sit, you adjust the posture, you adjust the breath, and then you start to meditate. And meditating then can mean that you count your breath, or you try to empty your mind, or you scan your physical perceptions, or you chant a mudra, or whatever. So meditation usually means sitting plus alpha, and the alpha part is the important part of meditation. So actually, in many traditions, the sitting posture is not so important. It's important what you do while you sit. And when Isho-san says Zazen is not meditation, he means this plus alpha is not there. You sit, and that's it. There's no plus alpha. There's not something yet that you have to do above the sitting or beyond the sitting. It's not that you sit and now the work starts, but you sit and actually that's where the game ends. And all other forms of meditation, the game starts after the sitting. Of course, when you say, well, just sitting and not doing anything else is also a form of meditation, then you could say that Zen is one of many forms of meditation. But when Isho-san makes this distinction, Zen is not meditation. What he means is we sit and that's it. Full stop.
Okay, I understand. So because if I have time for another question?
Yes.
I'm dealing with meditation in a broad way also from a scientific point of view. I do also research on meditation practice and its psychological and psychophysiological effects. What does change with people when they do meditate? And there is a classification in the scientific literature between focused attention, this is classical way of meditation, and the other thing is open attention.
Yes.
But anyway, in some communities and some videos I watched, anyway, they give some advice how to deal mentally when you're sitting. So there seems to me some little bit of confusion. What did you say now is very clear. It's just sitting and don't worry about what is going in your head. Isn't it right? Did I understand this in the right way? Or would you say...
What I just said is pretty easy and easy to understand, maybe. You just sit and do nothing else. But when you sit there on the cushion, and all of you probably have been there already, it's not easy at all. You adjust the posture, you take a deep breath, and then you decide to just sit there and do nothing else. But 3 minutes later, 5 minutes later, you realize you've been thinking all over the place. Your attention is nowhere. So what do you do then? Well, you can return to the posture, but 3 minutes, 5 minutes later, again, you're somewhere else. So maybe you return to the posture. So in reality, just sitting without doing anything else is the most difficult thing that you can actually aim at. It's almost impossible. The moment you try to do it, you're already trying something. So you're not just sitting anymore. And if you don't try, it doesn't work out miraculously either. So either way, without trying, you can't do it. With trying, you can't do it either. So what do you do? In my mind, although in Antaiji, and I think that's the same in most Zen places, we don't give any details, instruction. Well, the first month you do this, the second month you do this, and then in your second year, the third year you do this. Usually most people, they experiment a lot. They experiment with certain things, and I think that's okay. For example, first you maybe put your mind on the breath. You stay with the breath. So that would be a technique that belongs in the focused concentration area. To avoid your mind to chatter all over the place, you focus on something. That can be the breath, or it can be the tip of your nose, or it can be the hara, the lower navel part. And that isn't easy either, but it helps to develop that concentration part of the practice. And if you can get better at that, you might realize, okay, now I'm focused and I can watch my breath for 3 minutes, 5 minutes without my thoughts taking me here and there. Maybe the thoughts are still there, but the thoughts are now in the background while my mind is still focused on the breath. Then you might want to also experiment with this open awareness aspect, which probably to many newcomers, when they hear, for example, mindfulness, they don't really know which part is it. And for them, focused concentration and open awareness, isn't that the same thing, they might say? Well, it's not the same thing. It's not that they're completely disconnected, but being focused doesn't mean that your awareness is open. Often you have to actually narrow your awareness to be focused. And then if you open up your awareness so that you try to take in all perceptions, like what you see, what you hear, what you feel in the body, but also you're aware of the thoughts that appear and disappear without touching these thoughts. What then happens very easily is that you're not focused anymore and your mind is all over the place again. So what do you do now? Well, you can return, of course, to the focusing aspect. You can return to the breath for a while. You can return to the posture for a while. But you also want to stay open. So it's a kind of a back and forth thing. And to me, it's a little bit like, well, it sounds, how do you say in English, kind of, arrogance towards the other meditation practices, but I mean, some meditation practices, they are very kind in a way that they really teach you everything starting from the ABC, and 2 times 2 is 4, and then they proceed. And compared to these teaching approaches, Zen is sometimes like you put somebody into graduate postdoc studies. So basically, there's still a professor somewhere around, but the professor maybe studies something completely different. You do your studies, and from time to time, the professor might be there for questions, but you don't really get any instruction anymore. And Zen practice, in my mind, is like this. You sit in the cushion, the only instruction you get is you just sit and you don't do everything else. But the moment you sit there, 5 minutes later, there's chaos. So what do you do now? And you have to somehow deal with that yourself. In the book that came out in March in German, I also talk about these 2 aspects. In German, I say Konzentration, that would be concentration, and I say Aufmerksamkeit, that would be awareness. And that these 2 are actually not the same, but well, you have to try to connect them. And I give this metaphor that I've also in English given a number of times, like the sheep of your mind. And when you sit there, the sheep are all over the meadow, and they eat the grass, and they eat the vegetables, and they trample on the flowers. And you think you're the shepherd, and you think you have to build fences, and you think you have to count the black ones and the white ones and separate them. But the more you do as the shepherd, the more chaos there will be on the meadow. So what can you do? Well, one thing is you can find that big tree that's growing in the center of the meadow and lie down under that tree and look up into the branches. And in that moment, you forget about the sheep. That would be something like watching the breath, for example. Or you see there's these mountains far away, and you watch the mountains, either one of them or maybe the whole range of mountains. That would be like scanning the body or trying to be aware of the body as a whole. And that helps to forget the sheep, but it doesn't really help you in daily life, because in daily life you also have to deal with your thoughts and with your emotions. So the next thing you could work with is trying to see the whole thing from above. You put yourself in the position of the sky or even the moon. And you say, well, I'm not really responsible what's happening down there on the earth. I'm watching the whole thing from the moon. That would be open awareness. You take in the whole scenery, including the thoughts, and you observe them neutrally. And then the last step, which again is pretty easy to say in words, but is the hardest thing in practice, would be to get down on earth again. You go back to earth, but now you don't play the shepherd, but you become one with the meadow. You become the grass, and you allow the sheep to do anything they want with you. You say, you can trample on me, you can feed on me, you can even take a shit on me if you want to. Please go ahead. For example, in relation to the pain, it means to allow the pain to just be there and do with you what the pain wants. And the same with thoughts and emotions. And often what happens is that the problem turns out to be not as big as you thought it was. But sometimes it's just hell, and you allow hell to happen. And well, back to your question, what I said sounds very easy, just sit and do nothing else. But in practice, you have to do a lot of experimenting as well. And you sometimes try to concentrate, and maybe it will work out for a while. And then you try to open your awareness, and it also works, but then the concentration gets lost. And I think it's okay. It's okay to experiment that. So I think there's no contradiction there to just sitting, because this stuff that happens in your mind and what you do there is also part of the just sitting. It's just that we don't have, how do you say, didactical book. We don't have a Bedienungsanleitung for Zazen. how would you say, instruction book. There's no instruction book for the Zen, and that's a big difference to meditation. Most meditation practices, they tell you first you start with this, then comes this, and then you turn to this. Like, for example, mindfulness. Watch the breath, and then when you notice that you think, then let go of the thought and return to the breath. And that's what you do. And in Zazen, there's nothing. There's nothing, but in reality, you have to do a lot. You have to do a lot, and you never really know the answer. Like the first question that Amanda asked, how do you keep up proper practice? But after 30 years, I don't even know what proper practice is. I don't even know that. But I think that's the thing I love about Zen practice. There is no answer. There's no textbook answer. I don't know if I could answer your question, but at least I said a lot. I talked a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions, maybe?
Muhu, take me on the list. If there are no other questions, I have more questions.
Yes, please. And those of you who are too shy to speak, you can also write in this chat section, I guess. Right now, I got only from Yorgos a chat message, but if you feel shy to just talk into the microphone, then post the question in the chat section. Okay, Yorgos, another question, please.
First, what I take home out of you, what your answer to me is, this is a new aspect, I never thought about that, is that from a Zazen point of view, concentration, focused attention, awareness, as well open awareness,
yes,
belongs together. There's no, these are not alternatives. Is this right?
Well,
so, this is not a journey from focused awareness to open awareness. Because as I listened to what you talked, it was like, okay, maybe you leave being aware of your body, being aware of your breath, and all your mental awareness is open, actually. But then you said, okay, then you have to go back to then you are not concentrated, no focused anymore. So there's a kind of ambiguity or a tension between this. Is this right? Did I understand this the right way? This is no choice between focused awareness and open awareness?
I think you can at least aim at having both, but it's difficult. It's comparatively easy to have only one of them. I mean, you need some training for that either, but it's comparatively easy to just focus on one thing. For example, on your breath, or you put, I don't know, a black dot on the wall where you sit and you try to focus on that black dot all the time. Even that is not easy for 1 hour, but you can do it and you can become better at that. Trying to be open to anything is also not so difficult. When you hear a bird chirp, you hear that bird. If you hear a car drive by, you hear that car. If you feel pain in the knee, you feel the pain. If there's a thought popping up, you're aware of the thought. But to have them both together, that means you have an open consciousness, but it's sharp at the same time. So you have an overview of the whole panorama, but it's not some fuzzy, blurred out vision, but actually you see these things in a sharp way. It's actually very difficult. And I think in practice, it means that you have to go back and forth. So probably first start with some kind of concentration on the breath or on the body. Then you open up, but then when you realize I'm just dreaming, I'm just telling myself I'm sitting here and I'm open and aware, but actually I'm just dreaming, then you might return to the position. For example, what I said, you watch the moon, the earth from the moon. At that point, you're not one anymore. The observer and the observed are different from each other, but you need this checking from time to time to really see, do I still see in a sharp way? So these two are not completely contradictory, but just because you have concentration doesn't mean that you have open awareness, and only because you have an open awareness doesn't mean that you're concentrated. It's, from my experience, really takes long years of practice to somehow bring these two together, and even after years you won't be perfect.
This was just a comment, but the next question was actually, it's kind of related to some philosophical background of Zazen.
Yes.
There was in a lecture, the presenter actually finally said that for Zazen, we have to believe something, that there is something absolute. This was German, a bad translation. Or put it otherwise, is it necessary? You can practice Zazen without being a Buddhist? This is another facet of the same question. You see, if you're not a Buddhist, some people say, yeah, let's stay with that. It's a,
do you have to be a Buddhist? Well, of course, my first question would be, what is a Buddhist? What are the conditions for being a Buddhist? What do you have to believe or practice to qualify as a Buddhist?
Well, there is a lot of books on Buddhism, and some beliefs in about how the world or people are behaving. This wheel of suffering, and to overcome this wheel of suffering, and so on. There is a lot of statements about Buddhist worldview. I think, like being a Muslim or Christian, you have some beliefs. Somehow, what is how the world is constructed? What are the laws and the mechanisms in the world, and what would be the best way to do that? You have to help other people, and so on. So this is a system. There are several systems of believing and seeing the world, and I think there is some Buddhist, maybe a lot of variation, but that might be even a very hardcore of Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, that you get this reincarnation, for example. So and then they say you do practicing meditation to overcome this wheel of suffering, to get enlightened and to be free of all this suffering. This would be my very sketchy kind of characterization of Buddhism. So if you don't have this, if you're not in this system, so does it mean, is it meaningful then to, or
I think, well, it's still meaningful if it's meaningful to you. I mean, you have to decide if this practice is meaningful to you. But for example, I've had people come to Antaiji and they asked me, well, can I stay here for a year or two without becoming a Buddhist? And I said, yes, of course you can stay without becoming a Buddhist, because, well, in the first place, I don't really know what it means to become a Buddhist. Then maybe later they asked, can I ordain as a Buddhist monk? So now they decided they want to become Buddhist. And I say, well, if you want to, you can ordain here after a couple of years. So they asked me, what do I need to believe and to learn before I can ordain? And the answer is, well, you don't really have to subscribe to any beliefs. Like when I confirmed in the Christian faith, when I was 14, I had to memorize Our Fathers, and I had to, for 1 year, I had to go to church and learn certain stuff. But in Antaiji, and as far as I know, all of the Buddhist schools in Japan, at least the Zen schools, you don't really do that. I mean, there's some basic teachings in Buddhism, like, for example, suffering that you said. Life is suffering. And some people say, what are you talking about? Life is so beautiful. But probably most of us wouldn't be sitting if we had some feeling that, well, there's a problem here. I can't really name what the problem is, but there's some, well, suffering is maybe not the right word, but there's some dissatisfaction. I feel dissatisfied, even though I have all I need. I've got all the oxygen I need. I've turned on the tap and the water's coming. I have enough food. Still, I'm dissatisfied. But well, if you refuse to believe in that law of dissatisfaction, of course, you don't have to believe in that. But then why are you practicing in the first place? So probably most of us agree there's dissatisfaction in life, and it's pretty deep, although we don't know where it's coming from. And then the next teaching would be impermanence. But as Buddhists, we don't say you have to believe in permanence. We would say open your eyes, and what you see is impermanence. If you don't want to believe it, you don't have to believe it. It's just that if you open your eyes, that's what you're going to see. And the next thing is there's no ego. There's no core of the ego. That's also something that you don't have to believe in, like you have to believe in the Immaculate Conception of Jesus by Mother Mary. If you don't believe that, there's no proof. But in Buddhism, just look at the core of yourself, of your own life. There is no core. And if you don't want to believe it, you don't have to believe it. So I think the answer to your question is there is really no catalog of things that you need to believe in to practice Zen. Even this thing that's, well, is sometimes disputed, for example, between Theravada Buddhists, Tibetan Buddhists, and Zen Buddhists, reincarnation. Is it literally true, as you can find in some of the sutras? How did the Buddha think about it? Did the Buddha think there is actually rebirth, or did he just use it as a teaching tool? And sometimes the sutras seem to be a little bit ambivalent. Sometimes the Buddha says, well, think about your suffering right now and don't waste your thoughts on that. But sometimes the Buddha also seems to be positive on the teaching of reincarnation. And usually in Zen, including myself, most people say, well, you'll find out when you die. If you got reincarnated, you get reincarnated. If you fall into hell, you fall into hell. So what? I mean, every session you practice that already. So if you fall into hell, just continue where you are now. And if there's nothing, also great, no problems anymore. You'll find out sooner or later. So do what you need to do now. That would be my point on that. So from my perspective, there's really no need to become a Buddhist. But the reason why I hesitated in the beginning a little bit and asked you, what does it mean to be a Buddhist? When you say you don't really have to become a Buddhist, the temptation is there for people to say, okay, that's great. Then I do my Zazen thing, and then they mix it with their own structure, their own thing that they already have made there. So then I can be a whatever, like there's this spaghetti monster religion. I can be a spaghetti monster believer and do Zazen. Rather in Zazen, we would say, well, throw it all out. Throw it all out. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, even Buddhism. Let it all go. Let it all throw it out and then sit. And that's where the practice starts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I see here in the chat function, Andre and Henrik, you got the first one. Once you said something like Zen is not about mindfulness, but more about mindlessness. I think that was interesting. Can you say more about what that means? I think that's somewhere in the Antaiji homepage. It's an article entitled Stop Being Mindful. The point I'm making there, I mean, there's nothing wrong about being aware of what is happening right now. And in Antaiji also, for example, if you don't arrange your slippers, people will tell you, hey, arrange your slippers. Why is everybody so nervous about the slippers? Because in the moment when you get out of your slippers and your mind is somewhere else, you forget about the slippers. Or if you forget to switch out the lights in the toilets after you were the last one, people will tell you, hey, please switch off the lights. Not because electricity bills are so expensive, but because it's important that you realize when you're the last one, that you switch off the light. So mindfulness is important in that sense, but one danger I see with mindfulness practice, maybe I just met the wrong people, but with some of the people I met, it's like always this, I'm being mindful right now. So for example, they eat, and they eat very slowly. Why they eat so slowly? Because they count the carrot pieces that they have in the soup, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they think they are mindful, but actually they lose track of everything that's happening around them. Everybody else has already finished their meal. They're still sitting at the table counting the carrot pieces in the soup. Or they take a walk and they move like a snail because they have to count each step, and they lose track of everything else, and they're never really in the action. They're always somewhere above the clouds. Like, that's the problem also with the perspective from the moon. You're watching the Earth, you're watching what's happening on Earth from the perspective of the moon, and that keeps you to calm down, and maybe it helps you to get a broad awareness, but there's still always the observer. So when I said stop being mindful, what I mean is forget even the position of the observer. Don't always put yourself in this remote position where you count the carrots and you count your steps and you're mindful, and you congratulate about how mindful you are. Stop being mindful. At least from time to time, that's important. But at the same time, arrange your shoes and switch out the lights. Okay, next, after that, there's André. I think both Henrik and André from Denmark, if I remember right. In your metaphor of the game, you talk about leaving the game on one side and on the other side, entering the game. I find it somehow easier to leave the game, seeing things as empty, but how to enter the game without clinging on things? Because things are not only empty, but also real. So how is it possible to see that at the same time? And it continues. In your metaphor of the game, you talk about, that's the same question twice. Okay, so for all those who are maybe not familiar with the metaphor, the game, it's basically the game about winning or losing, being better as your rivals. Probably you started entering that game when you're 2 or 3 or 4 years old. If you're not a single child, you realize you have a brother, a sister, and you want to be loved the most by your mom. But your mom is maybe busy with your smaller sister. And right out of a sudden, there's this two. The world is divided into 2 or 3. There's your mother, there's you, there's the sister. You want to be loved most. You want to be better than your sister. When you're in school, there's 20, 30, 40 other kids, and you want to be the best. When you're 15, you want to be the coolest of the guys, and you want all the girls to look at you. And when you're 20, 30, you want a good job. You want to make all the money. And for probably a lot of people in the world, it's almost, well, impossible to quit that game because they're so absorbed by it. They think basically that's the meaning of life, to play this game and to get the high score, even if it's impossible to get the high score. That's what you aim at, and that's what life is all about. And a successful life means that at least you get a higher score than all the other players. But probably most of us who are here right now have understood that it's actually quite a boring game. It's a stupid game. It's stupid to waste day after day of your life on playing that game. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting on the cushion. So as André said, in a way, at least if you already found the practice, if you found your way to the cushion, it's easy to quit the game. That's basically what you're doing on the cushion. it's not that easy. You understand that actually when you're in the middle of the retreat, probably you would do anything. You would love to do anything but sit there. So you want to be back into the game. Check your emails, this and that. How many likes did I get for the last YouTube video that I uploaded yesterday? And if it didn't get as much likes as the one before, then I don't feel so good. So that's basically when I'm in the game. I also play the game. Whenever I upload a YouTube video, even if I talk about the Dharma, actually I'm playing the game again. So practice starts with stopping the game, at least for a while. You quit the game. You don't compare yourself with the rivals anymore, because once you're sitting there on the cushion, there is only you. There's only this reality of you sitting on the cushion. You can't compare your Zazen to anybody else's Zazen. You can't compare your own Zazen to yesterday's Zazen even. There's no comparison possible, and there's no winning and losing anymore. That's how practice starts. But then there's the second part that Andre is asking the question about. So after that, well, there's also the choice to never get back into the game. One radical version would be you stop eating and you fast to death. Or you do maybe a less radical version and you say, well, if people want to feed me, you're welcome to feed me, but I don't work. I don't cook as well, but I'm a practicing Buddhist. So if you want to help a practicing Buddhist, if you want to, you can give me food. If you want to, you can cook it. And if you put it in front of me, I will eat it. Apart from that, I will do nothing but my meditation practice. But in Mahayana Buddhism, and Zen belongs to the Mahayana tradition, we would say that's not enough. It's not about solving your own problem. And maybe your problem feels as if it has been solved the moment you quit the game. There's no more reason to compare yourself. There's no more reason to feel down if people gave you a thumb down. And there's no reason to always want to be the coolest and the most beautiful in the world. You won't be anyway. The moment you quit the game, most of your problems dissolve, but you're not the only person in the universe. There's other people who are still trapped in the game. So as a Mahayana Buddhist, you say, well, I won't enter nirvana before everybody else also has managed to escape the game, or at least to see that the game is just a game. So you enter the game again, you play with the others, but it's a little bit like if I would play with my kids. I teach my kids to play chess, and I try to be serious when I play with them chess. But on the other hand, it's not about that I want to win. I know I can win against my kids, but I want to teach them that it's actually fun to play that game, and to have fun in the game. Of course, I also have to teach them how to win. That it needs to be about winning, to be fun in the beginning. But then if my oldest daughter, for example, would play with my youngest son, and she teaches him now to play chess, and she plays with the same attitude that she had before. So she wants to win against her father. And if she wins against her father, it's fun for her. She does it with the same attitude against her younger brother, then her younger brother will not play with her. So I also have next, that would be the second step. First, I teach my daughter how to play chess and how to win, but then I teach her that she also needs to be willing to lose sometime so that other people have fun. That's basically what we try as Mahayana practitioners after we return from the retreat into the so-called real world. We re-enter the game, we play the game, and we are serious about the game, but we also know that it's actually not about winning or losing, but to have fun, and to also teach others that to have fun mutually it's not about winning or losing. Of course, there's certain rules and we play with the rules, but at the end of the day, winning or losing and the points that we collected really don't matter so much. And as Andre says, that's actually not so easy in practice. Even if in my own case, as I said, like if I upload something on YouTube, it should be about the Dharma. And if people watch it or not, if they like it or not, is really secondary. But still, usually I check on YouTube analytics, then how many people watch this, how many ups I got, how many thumbs I go down. Usually it's only one or two, but then who was that? Who could that possibly be who gave me a thumb down? And so it's very difficult to escape that game in a really radical way and say, I don't care. You can give me as many thumbs down as you want. I do this just for the Dharma. So I have to remind myself from time to time. It's not about winning or losing. It's not about the amounts of thumbs ups or down that you got. Yeah, because things are not only empty, but also real, of course. And at the end of the day, you have to pay your bills. You have to eat as well. How is it possible to see that at the same time? You have to remind yourself, and well, remind yourself, for example, one thing is you're gonna die anyway. At that point, you can't take any of these points that you collected with you. So even if at age 80 you live in a big house and you have a happy family and everything else, you're gonna die. You're gonna die. So if you didn't enjoy the game up to then, and if you didn't help others to enjoy their game up to then it was probably a pretty meaningless game that you played. Maybe I get to the next question. It's in German. I try to translate it into English while I go along. If we all have Buddha nature, why don't we see it directly? Why don't we see that Buddha nature that we all supposed to have? Why do we have a discriminating mind? And why do we identify with this illusion of the ego? Well, in the question it doesn't mention, but basically me and the others, life and death, winning and losing. Why do we discriminate and why do we identify with these discriminations we make? We often talk about karma, but where does this distinction, where's the source of the distinction? Or to ask the question another way around, why does the universe create an awakened being or a being with Buddha nature? Why does the universe create an awakened being that doesn't recognize itself, or that's not aware of itself? Why do we have Buddha nature without being aware of that Buddha nature? And so why do we have to practice Zazen? And then I think the question stops. Wann habe ich mich getrennt? Oder anders gesagt, once you said, okay, so basically the question is, why are we in illusion? Where does the illusion come from? According to some Zen masters, we are all Buddhas already. We are already enlightened. How come I don't know anything about that? How come I don't feel like a Buddha? If I'm supposed to be a Buddha, how come I feel like an ordinary human being? How come that somebody who's been practicing Zazen for more than 30 years still has arguments with his wife, for example? The short answer would be, I don't know. It's a mystery. According to the Bible, that's because there was a snake that made Eve take the apple, and Adam ate it. And that's when they started to think discriminately, and they were out of a sudden ashamed to be naked, although they were created naked. Out of a sudden, oh, I'm naked, I have to hide that. There's good and bad, there's me and the others. But yeah, also in Christianity, it's not about delusion and about Buddha nature, but in Christianity, the big riddle is, if there's a good God who created the universe, how come there's bad? There's so much bad in the universe. Where does it come from? And in Buddhism, the riddle is, if everything is enlightenment, here and now, we are Buddhas already, how come we are so un-Buddha-like? How come that we discriminate all the time, or most of the time? One kind of a biological answer would be, well, to talk about enlightenment and to talk about being a Buddha in the first place, we need delusion. Otherwise, we couldn't talk about enlightenment. So if we would be enlightened already, then, well, we wouldn't be talking about enlightenment in the first place. So how come that only human beings make this discrimination? How come that, well, out of creation, only Adam and Eve ate the apple and none of the other animals? What happened there? Why have human beings these big brains that make them able to think so much and make all these discriminations? Other animals, of course, they have also brains, but most of the time they can trust their, well, instincts. While for human beings, for example, human beings need to cook foods, or most of the foods. Human beings don't really know what is poisonous and what they can eat. While most animals, I mean, they hardly have any problems with food poisoning. They can eat the stuff like this. The same about sex. When other animals are in heat, then the male partner gets attracted and they have sex so that they can have offsprings. While human beings, they want to have sex all of the time, but most of the time they don't want offspring. So they have this instinct that they have the sexual impulse, but it's, from a biological perspective, it's out of order. Something is broken there. So they want sexual satisfaction, but they don't want to take the consequences. They want to eat, but they don't know what to eat. They don't know what's healthy to eat. And when they eat and they get calories, they say, I want to go on a diet. I don't want to get fat. I want to eat, but if possible, without the diets. So they drink Diet Coke and whatever. It's a funny animal. So how come that this funny animal appeared? Well, one explanation I read somewhere, I don't know if it's the right explanation, but this explanation basically says, at the point where human beings started to walk on two legs all of the time, and I mean, monkeys also walk on two legs, but sometimes they're on all four. Human beings, when they started to walk for some reason on two legs all of the time, it put more pressure on the body of the females when they were pregnant. If you're walking on all four, you can be longer pregnant because there's less pressure on your pelvis. For human beings, they couldn't be as pregnant as long as it would take to actually give birth to a fit individual. Like all other animals, when they're born and after a week or two, they can already walk by themselves. They start to look for food for themselves. Often after 2 or 3 years, they can also procreate. It's only human beings that even after 20 or 30 years don't even know what to do with their lives. Even after 2 or 30 years, they don't know how to deal with their sex drive. Even after 20, 30 years, they want to eat more than they actually know that is healthy for them. And most other animals can deal with that after 2 or 3 weeks. So why? Well, the explanation I heard is that because we walk on two legs. We can't stay in the womb of our mothers for long enough. So we're actually, every human being by definition is born premature. And our bodies and our heads are not really in harmony with our instincts, as would be the case with other animals. So we have to somehow use other tools, and the tools which we are using is our discriminated thinking. We have nothing other to use. We have to analyze what we're eating and see how much proteins are in there, how much carbohydrates, how much fat, how much do I need, what is really healthy for me, how much kids would I like to have, does my economic situation actually allow me to have these kids? If the answer is no, then if I want to have sex, then I do safe sex, and so on and so on. Without our brains, we would be extinct. But because of our brains, of course, we're in delusion. We're right in the midst of delusion. And even when we do Zazen, we don't feel like Buddhas. But often we feel that we're even more deluded than we felt before we started to practice. At least that was the case in my own case. And I hear that from many people, that after 2, 3, 4, 5 years of practice, I feel even worse. I thought that practice would make me a Buddha, and now I feel even more incomplete, even more imperfect. And Dogen would say, well, that's the proof that your practice is actually going in the right direction. If you think that Zazen has made you a better person, you must be doing something wrong. If you think that through Zazen you became a Buddha, that's the biggest delusion you can have. If through Zazen you realize that actually there's still lots to do, that's the light, the Buddhist, well, the light of Buddha nature that's shining on you, but it's shining on you from behind. So what you see is the shadow. What you see is your discriminating mind, and you wonder, where's it coming from? Again, I don't know where it's coming from, but it's important that we realize this discrimination we make all the time. We probably couldn't survive without it, but it's important to realize it's just discrimination. It's just illusion. And this realization that we are deluded, is actually what you could call enlightenment. So it's not that we get rid of the delusion and then we get the enlightenment instead, but actually the realization, I'm a deluded person. I'm up to here, I'm stuck in delusion. That realization is the realization of a Buddha. Only a Buddha can have that realization. Without Buddha nature, we wouldn't have that realization. Yeah, but we never really feel really Buddha-like, which is good, because it's often the people that say, I'm a Buddha, I'm a good person, I'm a rightful person, that are causing the most problems in the world. So if you don't feel that practice has made you a better person, good for you and good for the people around you. Is there anything else in this chat function in your metaphor? Wenn wir alle die Buddha-Natur haben. Okay, I think that's the last one. It's here in Japan, it's 3:20 in the afternoon, 1 hour and 20 minutes. Is Sebastian somewhere there? Sebastian is responsible for the retreat. If I should stop talking, maybe you just give me a sign. Otherwise, if there's still questions, Sebastian, I see you. You're mute. I will unmute you. Sebastian, how do we do this? Should I go on, or should we stop now? And do you want to go on your cushions?
No, I think it depends on all the people. Like, if somebody has questions, just go for it. Otherwise, I would say, like, don't make it too long. Probably if there's like some more questions, go for it. Otherwise, just let's go on the cushion.
Okay, so if there's still questions, now would be the time to ask. Yeah, Chiaki-san, please.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you, Zazen.
Yes.
Many people compare to, it's not a comparison to meditation, but you mentioned about the body, how you recognize your body as you started doing Zazen. I think it's big difference, or meditation is quite a lot to do with mind.
Yes.
And overweighted. People thinking about all the time and what I'm thinking, but it was a very important point for me as I started doing the Zen. I was aware of my body. So if you read Kanza Zengi,
yes,
the instruction from Dogen Zenji, it's quite simple, but to follow precisely, he describes, it's not that easy. And he didn't write about instruction for mind state, and I couldn't deal with my body before, but I'm completely aware of my physical state. So it's a matter of balance with my body and mind, and how do you blindness of physical awareness is a big problem with so many people. So with me as well. So Tibetan Buddhism, they say sometimes it's our physical condition is the problem of us, because you said you want to eat more, you want to have more sex or something like that.
Yes.
But I think it's important to have a neutral position between mind and physical. And for the Zazen instruction with newcomer, I say just be aware or feel your body. If you have pain, just feel it. But that feeling is also active thing. So is it okay to say feel your body, or is it better to aware your body, or I don't know what. I'm a bit mixed up. What I wanted to ask.
Well, maybe I can say some things. You are addressing an important point. Sometimes in Zen we say body and mind are one. In Japanese, it's shinjin ichinyo. Body and mind are one unit. And Dogen says, I think it was in the Zuimonki, it says a lot of Buddhists use this word, but they use it as an excuse to not practice. They say, I'm already enlightened in my mind, so everything I do is an expression of enlightenment. My body can do whatever it wants because I'm enlightened. And Dogen says we actually understand it the other way around. Body and mind are one, so we have to start with the body. We practice with the body. We place importance on the physical aspect. So that also relates to the question that Yorgos asked in the beginning. Why does Fujita Isho, for example, say that Zen is not meditation? Because in all or most meditation practices, the body may be also important, but what's really important is what starts later in the mind. And for us, what the body does, the mind doesn't have to do anything above that, but the mind is there when the body sits. And I think it's a very healthy approach. For example, in Antaiji, and I think in most places, it happens that people during Zazen, they are dreaming. Sometimes they're obviously sleeping. But it has happened time and again that I tell people, for example, after session, why did you sleep all the time? And then people would say, why? I didn't sleep. I was awake. And they obviously feel that they were awake, but if you look at the body, they go like this, so they can't be awake. But when they're sleeping, so that they're not aware that they are sleeping. And the mind, the mind doesn't really know itself. With the body, it's easier. The body doesn't tell lies. And if you think you're sitting straight, but you're sitting like this, you might not be noticing it yourself, but somebody could take a picture, and then you will realize, oh, actually, my physical posture isn't straight. But we can't do that same thing with the mind. So if somebody says, I'm a Buddha, I'm enlightened, and you tell him, no, you're not enlightened. Actually, you're an asshole. Then he will say, you only say that because you're not enlightened yourself. Actually, I might look like an asshole to you, but I'm a Buddha. You can't take a picture of his mind and show him that picture like you could do with the body. Yeah. So in that respect, this physical aspect in Zen, I think it's very healthy because, well, you can observe your physical posture by yourself to a certain degree, and what you can't see by yourself, you can look at the mirror, you can take pictures of that. While the mind and kind of trying to explore the mind by the mind, it can take you in all kinds of strange directions. And well, sometimes in Soto, what Soto Shum Zen masters say, or at least what some Zen masters say, seems to, well, hint at that there's no such thing as Satori, and enlightenment is just a big word. And of course, that isn't true either. I mean, of course, there are realizations that you can have. There can be experiences, but the reason why we don't talk about it so much is because it can take you into very funny directions. And when people talk about the enlightenment experiences, nobody can really show it out there. Like, I can show you these glasses and everybody can have a look at the glasses. But with an enlightenment experience, anybody can claim anything they want. It's basically like the guy who says, I didn't sleep. Even though I looked like I was sleeping, in my mind, I wasn't sleeping. You can always say, in my mind, I felt like a Buddha. Okay, great for you. But if it doesn't reflect in your physical life, if you can't still switch out the light after you use the toilets, then, well, you have a problem. The people around you have a problem. So we start with the physical aspect. And what you said, well, putting your mind there into this physical practice, like, for example, in Zen, first, well, what do I do with my legs? What do I do with my hands? How's my spine? How about the shoulders? How about the chin? Your mind is there with the body. If you have your eyes half open, you also see that. Your mind is with the sounds as well. Well, again, I think it's a very healthy approach. You don't sit and then your mind goes somewhere, but you sit and that's where your mind is. So that's probably the answer why Dogen Zenji in his instructions for sitting spends quite a lot of words on the actual sitting posture, but then he says just sit after a deep breath, stable like a mountain, and think on the ground of not thinking. How do you do that? And then there's the Japanese hishiryo, which means it's not thinking, or you could say it's beyond thinking. But how do you do it? Well, he doesn't tell you the answer, but well, in a way you could say he already gives the answer when he tells you to position the legs and the hands and the spine, and actually the answer is already there. Hishiryo, what is beyond thinking is already happening in that moment when you're adjusting the body. And when your thoughts come up and they go here and there, that's also happening inside hishiryo. So you don't have to grasp hishiryo somewhere. It's already happening here. The thoughts are not hishiryo, but the thoughts are also occurring on the basis of hishiryo, beyond thinking. It's always here in this moment. But the body is connecting you probably in the most direct way, even the pain. When you're in pain, it's discomfortable, but when you're feeling the pain, you're here right now. That's hishiryo.
Yeah.
So another reason not to avoid the pain. Don't try to inflict pain on you, but also try not to avoid it.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? No more questions? Ah, Fernanda, okay.
Yes. Can you maybe say something about the not sitting type of zazen? Like if any other activities other than sitting are zazen?
I mean, the next thing, of course, is kinhin, walking meditation, which is basically the same as sitting, but well, basically you're walking and you take a half step with each breath. There's some small differences between the traditions. Well, in the Sawaki tradition, we have the hands like this. And usually I take that step when I breathe out. And when I breathe in, I lift up the next foot, I take the next step. One thing that's nice about walking meditation is usually you don't have so many thoughts because your mind in a natural way connects the physical movement to the breath. Another thing that helps to connect you to daily life is, well, maybe not during a solitary retreat like this, but if you're sitting in a sangha, you're not walking by yourself, but there's the guy before you, there's a guy behind you. And everybody has a different breath. So some people are faster than you, some people are slower than you, and sometimes you're annoyed, why doesn't this guy walk a little bit faster? He's slow as a snail, or there's a guy behind you and he's making pressure and you feel like, why is this guy stressing me out? So in Antaiji, I tell people, don't be too attached to the rhythm of your breath, or keep your breath steady, but adjust the size of your feet. Try to keep the distance between yourself and the others the same. So although you don't talk with people, you don't really engage with them in a proactive way, it's more obvious than in Zazen that you're not doing this alone. You're actually doing that with others, and you coordinate yourself with the others. And I mean, other important non-sitting aspects of Zazen, well, in Antaiji, obviously, it would be Tenzo, the cook who's cooking while the others are sitting, cooking for them. You have to produce the meal until it's meal time. You're not supposed to be late. The stuff should be on the table hot. It should be delicious. So you're under a lot of pressure in a way that's also a form of a game, but you don't do it for your personal gain. Nobody in Antaiji after sesshin meal tells the cook, oh, I really liked what you did today. You don't get any praise. You can't win anything. Usually after the tea meeting, after the session, all I say is criticism. I say, okay, there was a lot of movement and I saw you sleep, and the cook again, it was not really as it's supposed to be. So you're forced to play a game in the kitchen where you can only lose. You have to invest all this time and energy, and all you get is criticism. But in a way, that's also good training for so-called real life. I mean, that's what we try to be as Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. You give your all, and you put in actually in Antaiji 3 or 4 hours of hard work, and then it's on the table and people eat it in 10 minutes, 15 minutes silently, and nobody says a word after that. Great practice, great practice. And if we could do all of the work we do in daily life with that attitude, it would be great, but it's difficult. Well, even being the cook in a monastery, it's really difficult. Dogen says you should have 3 minds: the joyful mind, parental mind, big mind. Joyful mind says, I'm happy to be here in the kitchen right now. Most of the time it didn't work like that for me. I said I would like to be anywhere right now, but not in the kitchen. I would prefer to be sitting there on the cushion, or I would prefer to be outside, but I hate to be in the kitchen. And parental mind, cook as if it was for your child. Well, how can you think of your rivals, all these older monks that are always bitching at you as if they were your babies? You hate them already, and now you have to cook for them. Big mind, high like a mountain, like the ocean, means basically you accept anything. If the ocean wouldn't accept all of the rivers that flow into the ocean, it wouldn't be the ocean. Nice metaphors that Dogen Zenji is using there, but in real life it's not so easy.
So what about your experience outside of Antaiji? I mean, yours. Do you feel like sometimes you're cooking and you're doing Zazen or something?
Well, actually, I haven't been cooking for a long time, but because now of the coronavirus, my wife introduced this Tenzo cycle here where we lived in Osaka. So basically, also I and my kids who don't have school now, we take parts, or everybody of us has to make one meal, and the next person does it the meal. So the other day, I cooked actually for the first time in a very long time. And of course, if it's the first time in a long time, it's always fun. But then after so many times and you've used all your ideas and you don't have any new ideas, it can also be a little bit pressure. Or to be honest, I was actually already nervous the day before when I knew tomorrow I have to make lunch. I was a little bit nervous. Will my wife and kids like this? Yeah, I mean, in a way, for me, in daily life, it's a little bit easier because I don't have a real job, so to speak. I mean, I basically just do what I like to do, and turns out that I could survive on that. And right now, because of Corona, I can't do it, but I could always go begging on the street. So in a way, I'm in a privileged position because I don't really have to play the game. I can always excuse myself from the game whenever I want. Although family life is a game that I cannot excuse myself from. So when my kids have a problem, of course, I need to take responsibility for that. There's always times where you just have to do it. You just have to do it. And if it's fun or not doesn't really play a role. I mean, that's the connection to Zazen. Like it's the 5th period of the day. The first and the second felt good, but now the pain comes. You think about getting up, but then you ask yourself, well, what am I going to do when I get up? Well, you can go on into the internet, you can take a walk in the park, but at the end of the day, you have to live your life and you want to give your all. So in the case of the retreat, you give your all on the cushion if you're the cook. And you know I have to make lunch until 12 o'clock. At one point, you have to just stop bitching and thinking if this is really what you would like to do, or if there's more enjoyable options, but you just give your all and cut the vegetables and cook them and make sure that the rice is in the right condition.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, 20 minutes to 9 Middle European time. How do you feel?
Yeah, I would say, it's me, Sebastian. Musan, thank you very much for spending your time.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thank you to coming to this Zoom meeting. And well, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I hope it won't be the last time. So maybe people enjoy it to sit at different places, and yeah, I wish all of you like 3 days. Hopefully, it will be not so much hell. And if so, then it's like this. So have all a good sit, and hopefully see you next time.
Yeah, I also wish those who participate in the retreat a great retreat. If it's hell, then please enjoy hell. And for those who don't participate, have a nice day. And yeah, I hope we see each other again. I mean, I'm on YouTube regularly every Sunday morning, Japanese time. I'm also sitting live. So if you have time, that time slot, it's probably Saturday night in Europe. It's Saturday evening in America. At one point, you might want to join that as well. And maybe we have another Zoom meeting like this in English, or actually I'm thinking about having something in German as well next week maybe, or the week after that on a Wednesday or so. Still discussing that, but yeah, probably this is not gonna be the last time. So yeah, thank you for being here with me this time.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
All right.
Cheers.